We are trying to do as best as we can.
Yeah. And Ali, you as a doctor, how did you discover design?
That's a long story, but I discovered design through one amazing presentation by a lady called Hazel White, and she just talked about the double diamond and the importance of understanding the problem first. And that's not such a revolutionary thing to designers, but actually to clinicians who always think that they know best. That was like a very, very good way of going about trying to improve our hospital services. So, yeah, that's how I discovered design.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Sebastian?
On discovering design, I'm thinking back to like design is so broad. There's so many things. I think the trigger for me was the moment I understood that it's so easy to understand what people do from logs. So I come from a developer background as well. So from logs, you can see what people are doing, but you have no clue why they're doing it. And that led me into social sciences and design as a skill set. And it's very beautiful when you get that connection to someone and you understand what they're saying, but you can also see why they're saying it, which makes it many times sort of an art form. So I just fell in love with the people. I think that's the short answer.
Fun. Sarah, want to elaborate? If you unmute.
Design is my profession in a way, but after you work some years, you kind of end up understanding that people is the main subject of your work, and yeah. So I think it's maybe the feeling that design is very important to improve people's lives, I guess, and yeah, that we can be the part of the force to make it happen. So yeah.
No, it's fun to hear about all your different experiences. We've got a very interesting panel with us. Oscar, when Sebastian talks about how we analyze people's behavior, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, plenty. No, I think it's very interesting to see how these structures surrounding us influence us into some kind of behavioral pattern, and how that behavioral pattern again creates structures that we rely on. So I think a lot of design thinking is trying to understand how we can create the structures that support people and how people are kind of pushed by them. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, so hei og velkommen alle sammen. Velkommen til DARK-sending nummer 5. Det en igjen bare før DARK-festivalen som skjer i slutten av april, 29. og 30. Det det vi varmer opp til med disse sendingene. For når vi har en design- og arkitekturfestival, så skal vi jo ha ulike temaer, og når festivalen skal belyse hvordan design og arkitektur faktisk samfunnsnyttig, så det jo greit å gjøre det gjennom gode eksempler og ulike temaer. Så derfor har vi gått gjennom forskjellige temaer, og i dag så skal vi snakke om helse. Vi har med oss et flott panel, og vi innleder med en ekspert, og panelet ellers består av Inger Therese Hoff. Hun mor og arkitekt, og har startet Sonja Victorias stiftelse etter hun dessverre mistet barnet sitt til kreft, og har en levd historie med det, og jobber med blod, svett og tårer for å gjøre sykehus i Norge bedre. Vi har Sara Lund, som arkitekt i Spinn-arkitekter, har bygget både skolebygg, men også omsorgsboliger for eldre, opptatt av hvordan eldres innsikt bygges på fra tidlig fase og bygges inn i prosjekter. Vi har Sebastian Brage Hansen. Han leder for design og innovasjon. Det en ny seksjon innenfor Helse Nord IKT, som jeg lærte i dag består av intet mindre enn 500 mennesker. 15 av de på hans seksjon, 5 av de designere. Veldig spennende å høre om hvordan de jobber i sin hverdag. Og vi har han Oskar Vassmyr. Han stipendiat på UiT, på helsevitenskap, eller oss andre kaller det av og til for folkehelse. Han er også opptatt av de eldre og hvordan omgivelsene påvirker eldres evne til deltakelse. And we have our expert, Dr. Ali Walker, the sleepy doctor, or an anesthesiologist, as we call them, beamed in from Scotland. Welcome to you. You are a doctor who's discovered design, and you've managed to implement some nice design features in a big children's hospital in Glasgow. Can you please show us some of your projects, please, Ali?
Of course, thank you so much for inviting me to join the panel today. I would like to start with a story. The girl with the red curly hair is called Faith, and she is 8 years old. She is a wonderful little girl. Her favourite teddy is called Chukums. She also happens to have hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which means that she was born with half a functioning heart, and she's undergone multiple open heart surgeries. And I remember the first time that I met her because she was only 1 day old, and I'll never forget the look in her parents' faces that day because they looked terrified. And it's fair to say that many of the children, families who come to our hospital are going through some of the most challenging days of their life. I anaesthetised Faith a few years later, and I asked her father, I said, what was it like to bring your child to have heart surgery in our hospital? And he said, I'm so grateful that the operation has gone well. I'm so grateful for the kindness of the staff. And when I asked him, but what was it like to come? He said, well, it was very daunting, it was cold, and it was clinical. Now, Faith is only one story within an enormous hospital. Hospitals are filled with stories of happy days and very challenging and sad days. They are filled with emotion. And I think that those moments in hospitals can be overwhelming, and that the environment actually becomes part of the emotional memory that we have. So every detail, every corridor, every waiting area that we sit in shapes whether we feel afraid or whether we feel safe. I think one of the loudest, or not loudest, but clearest, maybe loudest voices in Norway on this subject is Inger Therese Hoff, who's on the panel today. And her story really reminds us that, you know, design carries an emotional weight. And so I just want us to think that, you know, in a healthcare setting, design is part of the care. So Faith inspired me to look at our settings, and this is our theatre reception area. And when I started to carry out user research, I realised that actually it was a place where people felt like they didn't belong. There was nothing really to do there, no privacy. And the fact that there were lines of trolleys made parents feel like their children were simply on a conveyor belt. And within that space, there was actually a blood fridge, which is obviously very anxiety-provoking and hasn't really been placed there with the child or the parent in mind. So we redesigned this space to be a much more playful, colourful, interesting and welcoming space. And our reception desk is kind of like colourful and tactile. In place of the blood fridge, we have put a toy museum. So it's taken that very clinical object and it's replaced it with something that invites curiosity. And on a daily basis, I see that we've created those micro moments between parents and children when they stand and look at it. So one of the most interesting things to me about the changes that we've made is that we have created a feeling of choice for the people in that space. They can choose where they sit or how they interact with it, which sounds like a small thing, but actually that sense of agency is really important in a place where often people feel like so many things are out of their control. If you look at the corridors leading into theatre as they used to be, the parent, as I observed, had been separated from the child because of the design of that corridor. So they kind of were behind and really probably very disempowered in that situation. Now that we've redesigned things and we have this fantastic artwork that continues along the corridors, it's a game they can engage with. This is our sensitive conversations room, which is a place where some of the most difficult conversations we have to have used to happen, the kind of conversations you really would never want to have as a parent. And just for reference, this is a police interview centre. They're both very grim environments. We have redesigned that space, and it really now reflects the deep emotional impact of the conversations that happen in that room. And it's a beautiful space where parents can take a moment, but also staff can take a moment when the emotional burden gets heavy. And I do think in hospital design, it's important to always remember the staff. This is our old rest area, which was a place we would hide in, but not necessarily feel that it was a restorative space. This is the new area that we have now redesigned. And I have observed that the conversations that happen between staff are now different. People are happier. You have these interdisciplinary conversations happening as a result of the environment. And I mentioned that hospitals are filled with stories. And so we have used our artwork to create this enormous mural, which has layers upon layers of patient stories, representation, people with different conditions, history. And I just love going out to see my patients who have become completely engrossed and lost in this world as they wait for their operations. We've used illustration as a way to ensure inclusivity. So this is Hannah. She has a rare condition. Rare conditions are represented internationally by the symbol of the zebra. So there are zebras in our artwork. When she came up to see the artwork, her eyes lit up when she saw the picture of a child on a wheelchair swing, because she loves to do that. And so although she didn't have the words to tell me, I could tell that she felt seen. And if you want, I mean, I could talk for hours about all the stories within the artwork. There is a presentation that tells you a little bit about the stories if you click on that QR code. So Faith came back. She came back to see our newly designed space, and she said, you know, it's great, Ali. How did you know that we liked all that? And my answer to Faith was simply, well, we asked and we listened. So for me, design is about making people realize that you have thought of them. And my starting point for this conversation is that as clinicians, as architects, as designers, as policymakers, as researchers, it is our responsibility to design hospitals and healthcare spaces that care. And we always have to consider the life experiences that may unfold within them. So I am super happy to be here and super excited to hear what the other panelists have got to say and to read what questions have come through from the live stream.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. That's a great way to kickstart the conversation, and it brings us already into our first question, which is, how do you think that architects and clinicians can work together to more effectively on the design of healthcare spaces? And Oscar, you have an answer for us.
Part of an answer, at least. Thank you for inviting me, firstly. I think that Ali, she brings up a lot of important points in her presentation. I think a lot of it is how we create our understandings of a space, right? A hospital, I think often you mainly think of it as a space where you come as a patient to get treated for some kind of health condition. But there's also a space for, feeling frustration or sorrow. Depending if you work there, it can be a space where you talk with your colleagues, or you kind of develop your own professional knowledge. From a hospital administrator, it could be seen through statistics and more of a economic idea of what the hospital is. So it really does depend on your perspective of how you kind of conceptualize this space. And I think that Ali's point of just talking to each other and trying to understand how each person involved in a hospital kind of creates their own conceptualization of that space. That conversation is very important.
Yeah, the simple answer being having conversations. Ali, you who've been working on these conversations, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think what's important is building that relationship between the designers, architects, and the clinicians. And I think that relationship should start as soon as possible. So I enjoy the fact that we had the design team and the clinicians working together on our discovery phase before we had written the brief. So that kind of mutual respect and empathy took away any feeling of us and them. And it was very important as well to sort of de-jargonize things, you know, that the architects didn't use things that I didn't understand and I didn't talk about clinical stuff that they didn't understand. We sort of met in the middle. The other thing that we enjoyed doing was kind of prototyping together and workshopping together and sort of just being very practical and kind of building a very strong relationship, you know. I suppose the other thing as well from a very practical point of view is that clinicians, we need time. We need time to engage with the process. You know, in the UK, you need 6 weeks notice to have a day off. So we need plenty of notice for those meetings so that we can be engaged. And also, I guess, if you really have to invest in things, the management should allow clinicians to have that time to really fully engage in the process, so we're not just kind of an afterthought and don't really properly understand what's going on. I don't know if that makes sense.
I do. And I'm wondering, Sarah, maybe you've got some experience where you've, as an architect, have worked together with the clinicians in your projects.
Too. And I guess that's my comment is all these it's so easy to say that the success of a project is that it's kind of done on a specific date and the amount of money is not more than we expected. But we all know that a lot of projects they're finished and then they're already too small and not working as they should. And if we could kind of, in a way, I guess a hospital is a place where they work more or focus a lot on the early users. Of course, not enough if we could say something, but yeah, it's always a kind of a fight, I feel, to explain that or to make them understand that all these small things are kind of what will be the end results or just the success in a way. And it's so easy for the decision makers to say that we don't have time for more than 2 weeks of this or that, and it's what separates the good projects from the less good projects, in my opinion. So yeah, I think it's we can't be doing it enough.
No, I guess you have a comment to that, Sebastian.
Well, first of all, I would just say, Ali, mic drop. You said everything that needs to be said about this. What I find always interesting is like, how do you allocate the time and the resources? Because intuitive when working with design and working with the field is like, we know that this process needs to happen when we know the end result should be good or will be good. But it's always kind of a hurdle to get a sign off on doing that, like taking clinicians or technicians out of work, taking people out of projects to do greater discovery. So hopefully I'm about to learn something from you other guys, how we can do this better, because I think that's one of the challenges, especially within any social science, is documenting how 100 hours of talking to people made a product better.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, we're getting into it all. And if you at home or watching have any questions, there's a QR code coming up on your screen, and you can simply scan that, and then we can put the questions into our deck. We've only got 15 minutes left, so you need to be quick. And so we're moving on to our next question, which I'll say in Norwegian. Hvorfor starter du Sonja Victorias stiftelse, Inger Therese?
Lov til å være her. Jeg vil starte med å si at jeg fikk jo en datter, Sonja Victoria. Hun fikk leukemi da hun var 6 måneder gammel. Hun var lur, sta, og hun var inderlig høyt elsket. Og i 2,5 år så kjempet vi for et mirakel. Og periodevis så var vi jo hjemme, der vi hørte hjemme og der vi alle var glade. Men halvparten av hennes lille, men hele hennes liv, så var vi på sykehuset. Og rammene for livet hennes, og barndommen hun fikk, det ble bestemt av den sykehusarkitekturen vi levde i. Av rom som begrenset familieliv, barnelek, og til og med verdigheten vår, mer enn det beskyttet oss. Og som arkitekt, altså arkitekten var ikke våken i starten, men arkitekten våknet etter hvert. Og det slo meg at dette må jo gå an å endre. Det må da være mulig å lage bedre rammer rundt et sånt sårbart lite barneliv. Det bør ikke være et mirakel. Og det er jo sikret gjennom barnekonvensjonen. Og det er fysisk og konkret, og det bør jo være mulig. Og så tenkte jeg at kanskje jeg var dum som tenkte det, men jeg tenkte at de som har tegnet dette, de har bare ikke visst bedre. Så hvis jeg bare fortalte dem det, så kanskje det ble annerledes. For rommene og gangene vi levde i, de var jo hvite, små og triste. Og jeg mente at det burde være varmt, trygt og bidra til at vi skulle føle oss som hele. Og derfor startet vi stiftelsen. Og allerede da vi bodde på sykehuset, så begynte jeg å sende sånne kalde e-poster til alle jeg mente burde vite hvordan det er å være en familie på sykehus i Norge. Og jeg fikk få og veldig lite engasjerte svar tilbake. Og så hørte vi om Børneriket i Danmark. Det var et sykehus hvor Børneriket da er arbeidstittelen til sykehuset, Mary Elizabeth's Hospital, som ble bygget på barnas premisser, med lek som utgangspunkt for alt. Og jeg sendte dem 1 e-post og fikk 3 svar tilbake. Og i det første møtet så viste de meg en film, og det er den filmen vi skal vise her nå. Og jeg gråt da jeg så den, og jeg gråter fremdeles når jeg ser den. Fordi det er et faktisk og fysisk bevis på at vi ikke bare var de krevende foreldrene som alle sa vi var. Det var noen som tenker det samme som oss, og noen som gjør noe med det. Og de viser også hvordan det er mulig å bygge et sykehus hvor barn og deres familie blir spurt og lyttet til. Og barna blir tatt på alvor, og det legges opp til at barn skal få lov til å være barn. Også når de er syke og bor på sykehus. Så
da tenker jeg vi rett og slett skal se den filmen, Inger Therese.
Ja.
Og tusen takk som denne.
One of the most important decisions we made when we did the pre-study was to plan this hospital inside out. I asked a boy that if he got one wish for the new hospital, and he got only one wish, what should that then be? He started speculating, and I thought, well, now he wanted a full-size racing car simulator or something fantastic like that. And the answer came, I would like that you could open the windows in the new hospital so you can feel the air in your face and your hair. I realize you do not have the fantasy to imagine what the needs are for the patients. So we asked our users, the clinical staff, the patients, the parents, and we handed over to the architects and said, design a hospital that will fulfill these needs.
How could this be what they wanted? Because there was no shape in what they wanted, of course, so we have to give their source some kind of a shape. This is not just a normal hospital, but it's whole families in extreme fragile situation that we need to take care of within that hospital.
We mapped 100 different diagnoses, patient pathways. Then we put stickers on the wall for every contact that the patient had. And when we got the results, we saw that we subjected our families to a long and very troublesome journey where they were their own guides. We looked at each other and said, this calls for a completely different organization. We agreed that in the new hospital, it was the expert that should come to the patient and not vice versa. So get a better treatment, faster diagnosis, but also lesser visits to the hospital and completely different way of working.
Thank you. This film always cracks me up. So I'm going to pass the conversation on to Sarah.
Yes, I know it's kind of sad because it's so obvious in a way, and I think it's why shouldn't we focus on the users first and foremost, and then have the most successful project? And I guess that was my point earlier. And it's also because designers are not like magicians in a way. It's very complex. When we work with elderly people, it's very different from when we design a school with children that are mostly they have the same development, and it's but when we go to the omsorgsbolig and the places where people have very different developments and very different situations, and they're going from quite young and well, and then on the time that they're living there, they turn older and sicker, and so it's a very complex situation. And we are not like, of course, we're close to genius, but we are not kind of magicians. And the important part of the project is that process with the users to understand the complexity and not kind of just assume something, which is kind of the easy way out, and say, oh, people need this and this, and they actually need several things. So this is one of our omsorgsboliger in Bardu kommune, where Bardu kommune actually, they kind of gave some extra space, and we had to kind of make some all these places that you, as we call it, you program them and say, this is going to happen like this and this. But this project actually got some spaces that are left over, and we see that the activity there is kind of a big part of the apartments and the social space. So it's something about kind of asking them what you need, and but it's not always you get the answer. So yeah, I guess this is what designers can do. We can kind of say that you create spaces with like the possibility for life in a way.
Exactly. No, and that's what we want to see more of. Sebastian, you might have some thoughts you want to share with us.
Yeah, as always, when Inger talks about these things, it tugs at your heartstrings, and I feel a great deal of it is what was mentioned here after. So, can you help before people reach a stage where they're at the hospital? So I think that's a big thing to look at as well, not just the architecture of the place itself, but what happens before you get to the place. Like, what is the communication going into it? How are you prepared for that? What kind of tools and services do we have for people to manage their own health before they need to go to the hospital? Take Northern Norway, where we are now. It's the biggest region in the health sector of Norway. If you map our health sector to a map, it's from New York to Miami. That's pretty far. And here we are in Tromsø. We're actually about in the center because we cover Svalbard as well. So it's a huge area. We need so many helicopters, so many things to make this happen, to just move people around. So I think we also need to kind of maintain a good health before people reach a stage where they have to go to the hospital. Jan Christian Vestre said it beautiful. When you're coming to a hospital, it should be a VIP treatment, because everything should be just on staff, because there's so few people there. Jan Christian Vestre is the Minister of Health, by the way.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you very much. That brings us to probably our last question today, and that is, what is your best tip to convince decision makers to use design methods when shaping old and new health environments? And as you said, Sebastian, it's so important to think about the whole experience. Both, obviously, we think about hospitals straight away, but the time before hospitals, life at home, life in the streets of the town or the place you're living in. Oscar, I guess you, from a public health sector, have some thoughts on exactly that.
Yes, I think it's a bit of a dreary answer. I think decision makers, especially in healthcare, which is under such a, sometimes a market ideology where cost and cost effectiveness is such a important thing to think about. You need to talk about or try to at least frame design thinking into how this can either save you money or be more effective, which is, the truth. I think that involving patients, users of health services, and clinicians into the design process ultimately leads to a more effective product. So I think you kind of need to be able to describe the value of thinking in that way.
Describe the value. Ali, do you agree?
Yes, I think that decision makers in healthcare have a really difficult job, and they are met continually with problems. So maybe flip that and bring them a solution. And that's what we did in our hospital. We brought the solution of design to them, and we started small. So we transformed our staff room, but we're able to collect data to show that staff satisfaction went up. Staff restfulness was improved, which of course is a good thing if you're going to be operating on children, that the staff feel rested. And also, interestingly, that staff were more likely to recommend our theatres as a place to work after the transformation. So I think it's going with solutions rather than problems can help, and starting small.
Starting small. Sebastian, do you have a very quick answer for us?
I think Ali touched on it. Make skunkworks happen. And I also have one general recommendation for any designer. It's learn enough business economics to underline the cost and value of what you're doing. And that's just learn the basics.
Yeah. Sarah, final words? If you unmute.
You can show them the graph that shows that if you have a lot of fun in the early stages, the end result is good for economy and time management. So science shows it's a good thing.
Exactly. Well, on that note, we unfortunately need to round off today's conversation. Thank you so much to everyone who has been joining in the panel and also been listening to us and sending in questions. As I've mentioned in the beginning, these talks are building up to DARK Conference and DARK Festival at the end of April, 29th and 30th of April here in Tromsø. Very welcome, everyone. It's free this year since we're shutting down Nord-Norge, where I work. Nord-Norge is Northern Norway's Design and Architecture Centre. So this is our final hurrah. So please come join us, celebrate the past 11 years of Nord-Norge, but also the opening of potential new doors. We don't know what will happen afterwards because design and architecture is still important and hopefully has the solution to many important questions that we have here in society. So thank you very much for today, and join us next time on the 14th of April, our last final broadcast before dark. We don't actually know what the topic is yet, so if you've got any ideas, any big broad topics that you want to hear more about from a design and architecture perspective, write to us, dark@norda.no, give us your thoughts, and tune in on the 14th of April. See you then.